We're going to finish this series, and I want to really hit home the final encounter that we have with this series and this message, which is getting to know God's heart and how much within God's heart people exist. The whole globe, if we look at God's heart in a mirror, or if we look at it in perspective, we can see that inside of his heart, other than love, exists a multitude of people. You and I exist in that heart. And the outpouring and the grace and the passion that God has for every single person here is amazing. And that's why we kind of spent some time on this together and getting to know his heart, because sometimes we think God is just too distant, too far away, too spiritual, too galactic, too authoritative to believe that God actually cares for people. Can you tell someone next to you, God actually cares for you? God actually cares about you. And it's amazing to think that the creator of all things has people in his heart. And he enters into this world as a human being, as Jesus Christ. There was so much passion, so much drive for every single person that is here, for every single person that's on the street, for every single person that's in the prison, for every single person that's in a hospital bed, for every single person that is here. There was so much passion and so much drive for us that he enters this world, and we know the story, we know the Christmas event, we know the little baby on a manger, and we say how cute, and we take pictures with our kids, and the little camels, and the little goat, and the little sheep that are around, and we dress up our kids with like the three little wise men, and we know the whole cute nativity scene. But just remember the fact that he entered into humanity. He entered into our space. He entered into our world as a human being, being God, being the one that ruled the universe. As we've repeated time and time again, the Bible teaches us without Jesus, the world couldn't have come into existence. And yet he comes in, intersects, invades our space as a little baby, as a human, and not in a glorious way. Not in a way where people could have been like, wow, this is it. This is the king that we've been waiting for. This is the liberator that we've been praying for. This is the redeemer that the Old Testament promised about. It wasn't a spectacular event. It was just a little manger. It was just a little house. It was just a little moment where a woman couldn't find anywhere else to go, but wherever she was, she found shelter, and there came Jesus. Nothing spectacular, nothing that CNN would have reported, none of that. We last week, or when was it, when the famous the queen or the princess gave birth to the kid, and everyone was on it. I was trying to watch real news on CNN, and the only thing they were talking about was this baby being born. I'm like, man, I'm trying to see what's going on around the world. I don't care about this baby. And they're just, that's all they're doing. And then on every channel, it was about this king baby. What was his name that they named him? George or something. And it's like, man, when Jesus came in, it was nothing like that. There was no lights. There was nothing spectacular about it. And the importance of that, he comes into our life, interjects, comes in, and he's raised, he grows up just like you and I. How many of you have felt pain? How many of you have been betrayed? How many of us have lost someone? How many of us have been lied to? He grows up and he feels everything that you and I feel. He knows everything that you and I do, because he grew up in the same atmosphere. Being God, he made himself flesh, just like you and me. He had to work for a living. How many of you work for a living? Say I. And all the young teenagers in the house, you guys are lucky. You guys are still freeloading off mama and daddy. And some of you 30-year-olds are still freeloading off mama and daddy. And that's a whole nother message. But he worked for a living. He was a carpenter. He was a man. If you probably looked at his hands, you could probably feel the roughness, because he actually had to work. He wasn't just some king that came into our life and said, I love you, and didn't understand or didn't know anything about us. He was just like you and me, felt it all, experienced it all, because he loved every single one of us here. He gave up his right just because there was a level of importance in your life that was tugging at his heart. He didn't have to do any of that, yet he did it. And he comes into the world, and we forget sometimes this great event that Jesus came in and was just like us because he cared for us. Everything he did was because he cared. Can you say cared? He cared for us. He actually cared. He was actually concerned with our outcome. He was actually concerned with our trajectory. He was actually concerned with our eternity. He came in because he knew that there was a plan of the enemy to separate us from our Creator, to separate us from the Father. And Jesus knew that the heart of the Father was to be connected with his people. So he came in and he gave himself and he gave his life up so that we could reestablish connection. And we could be where we were originally supposed to be. So he comes in as that human form so that we could reconnect and reestablish connection with our Father. And that is something that we cannot overlook. You're going through difficult times. You're going through a rough time in your life. There's sadness, there's brokenness, there's hurt in your life. And you got to remember sometimes that everyone just wants to give up and throw in the towel and just forget about everything. And you just got to remember that Jesus took you into consideration at the initiation of everything. At the start of life, he took you into consideration. He didn't have to, but he did. And that is the awesome thing about Jesus. He wanted to establish connection. He wanted to meet us where we were. So Jesus comes in, and around 31 years old, Jesus begins his mission on earth. His mission on earth didn't start until roughly 30 to 31 years old. And he comes in and he knows, I worked for a living. I felt what everyone has felt. I've sweated tears. I've done it all. I've gone through the pain. Sometimes I couldn't eat. Sometimes having to talk with my parents growing up as a teenager. He's felt it all. And he comes in and he says, I have a message to give. There is something of vital importance. The reason why I came in lies on this message. And the message was to establish connection with the Father once again. And the way he was going to do it and the way he was going to present it is something mind-blowing, because if you're coming into the universe and you're coming into to make this grandiose message and give something so spectacular, this is going to change your life. This is going to revolutionize your life. Your eternity is going to be completely different. And the way he chose to do it is mind-blowing. Because rather than let's build a humongous church, let's make a church that is so glorious that people come in and they're just like, wow, better than Oak Brook, better than the Water Tower, better than the Taj Mahal, better than any other building. Let's make it so that when I stand up, I could present my message to this world. He didn't decide to do it that way. If we read the New Testament and how Jesus actually did his work, it's mind-blowing, because his pulpit was a boat, a fisherman's boat, a stinky fisherman boat. There was probably dead fish in the boat every time he gave a message. His church, it was wherever the people were. It wasn't an awesome big-time building with stained glass windows and a big old cross in the front. It was wherever the people were. Sometimes it was by the seaside. Sometimes it was on a mountain. Sometimes it was just in a field. Sometimes it was in a home. Church back then was wherever Jesus was. And that's why I'm glad we're in a factory building, because a lot of my friends say, where's your church at? And I'm like, oh, it's right in front of the freshman center. They're like, we have never seen a church there. Where's that church? We've never seen a church. I'm like, yeah, it's right in front of the freshman center. There's a bunch of factory buildings there. I'm like, yeah, that's one of them. One of the factory buildings is our church. Like, no way, you're in the factory? Oh, that's cool. I gotta go check it out one day. And I love the fact that we're here, because it's not the most spectacular building that we have. It's not something pretty and beautiful, but we're making it work because Jesus is here. And wherever Jesus is, there's church. You and I become church. We could be outside right now, but it's kind of cold. chose to be inside. And because Jesus is here, so Jesus comes in, not in a spectacular way to present the message. Here's the message that he has. All of this is in him right now. It's not physically with him like this. It's inside of him. And he's going to present the message of salvation, of saying what Paul is going to say in the future, of presenting everyone, your only way out, your only way for hope is through me. And you cast all your cares on me. You cast all your burdens on me. You cast all of your worries on me. All of your pain, all of your agony, you cast it on me. And I will lift up your burden. And I will lift up your yoke. And you won't have to go through it alone. And so that message that he gives it in the way of a story. And he starts telling stories. As a matter of fact, the stories that Jesus tells and says are called parables in the New Testament. And basically the essence of what the word parable means is thrown on the side. So you picture this. Jesus is presenting a message, but as he is presenting it, he's just throwing stories on the side to kind of back up the message. And Jesus does this because once again, he comes into humanity so that he could understand us and know the pain that we go through and be able to connect with us and relate with us. But he also speaks in stories so that people rich and people poor could understand him a little bit better, can connect with a story. Every single one of us here can connect with the story. I am a horrible storyteller. I am a horrible joke teller. That's why I don't even say jokes here, because you guys would be like, where was the punchline? I'm just the worst at it. But there's a lot of us here that can say great stories, that love to listen to great stories. And every time you're probably reading a book or you're daydreaming at work and you're coming up with a bunch of stuff in your head, and you could just make the most awesome stories. And it's awesome to know that and to experience that. And that's why Jesus comes in, because he cares so much about you. He cares so much about the person next to you. He cares so much about who you are that he says, I can't just start talking theological stuff to these people. I can't just start talking big church words and holiness words and celestial words, because it's just going to fly over their heads. They're going to be like, what are you talking about? What are you saying? Jesus understood that in order to connect with the people, in order for the people to get the message, the life-transforming message, he had to present it in the way of a story. And that is why stories are so important in your life. And when you speak of the story that happened in your own life, many of your friends need to know the story. Many of your friends need to know your own story. And maybe through that, they can connect. And maybe through the amazing thing Jesus did in your story, they can relate and connect and want that same hope. I don't know if you remember your story, but my story haunts me. The way I was, the way I did things, the way I experienced church, the way I didn't do church, the negative things I did in my college years. I mean, all of that stuff haunts me. It's a horrible story. But then the glorious part of the story is that Jesus came in and intervened and made it all better and made it all so much more glorious than just having a lame story with a bunch of bad things that I did as a young kid. Jesus came in. Jesus becomes the center of our story. We all need that story. We all have a story to tell, and it's time for Jesus to be involved in it. He didn't preach from it from a big pulpit. It wasn't anything like this. He talked from where he was. Everywhere the people were, he was there. And Jesus at that moment is telling them, wherever you are, I will be. And Jesus at this moment right now is letting you know, wherever you are at, I will be. Everyone thinks, and there's a lot of people that put up like their fingers like this, like the church is a bad place or too much of a holy place for someone like me to come into. Like, hold up. No, you want to bring me to church? Hold on for a second. Let me clean up my act. I'm a little bit dirty. I'm just bad. You know, there's stuff in my heart. Like if you would have known what I did last week and the week before, you wouldn't want me anywhere near a church building. And sometimes people confuse that, and they think that they have to clean up their act so that they could come to church. And unfortunately, the religious folk and the church people have kind of given that kind of notion that, you're dirty, you're a sinner, you're horrible, stay home, don't even come to church, you're just too much of a bad person. And their religiousness and their churchiness kind of blends it, and it turns people off. No one has ever said you have to work for God to meet you where you are at. You could be here right now, broken, filthy, hurt, in the worst place, in the worst moment in your life. And Jesus is saying, I am here. I will meet you where you are at. I don't need a fancy place. I don't need a big time pulpit. I don't need a multitude of people listening to me. Wherever you're at this moment in your spiritual journey, maybe you're far away from me. Maybe you're completely away. Maybe all of your actions have pointed to something else. Maybe you've contemplated the worst possible things in life. But let me let you know, Jesus is saying, I'm here to meet you where you are at this moment. You don't have to be perfect. I love this church. There's this church in Atlanta that puts out before they come into their auditorium. It says a humongous sign, and it says, "No perfect people allowed." I'm like, man, I'm gonna copy that. I'm gonna put that right here at the entrance right there. Just no perfect people allowed. None of us have made it. None of us have got to that completion in our spiritual journey that says, I made it. Paul himself says in Ephesians, the race that I'm running, I haven't yet made. I haven't yet crossed. I'm still fighting. I'm still working at it. And if the Apostle Paul is still working at it, chances are all of us are in the same boat, in the same race. You don't have to clean up your act in order to meet Jesus. Jesus is going to meet you where you are. And in that meeting and in that moment, you can decide life change experience, or stay the way you are and swallow your hurt and live hurtful life by yourself. Jesus doesn't want any of that to happen. Jesus wants to meet you where you are at. Can you open the door today for that type of experience? Are you willing to come together for that? Because not only you need it, but the world needs it. That's why the heart of God, that's why this message, the heart of God, is so important, because people need to know and understand God is seeking, God is wanting, God is yearning, God is pursuing every single one of us here. Sometimes we're just too deaf, too stubborn to open up and say, God, I do need you. We swallow our pride. We are too prideful. Can you imagine a place? And this is, I've grown up in church my entire life. I know the ins and outs of churches like never before. I've gone through it all. I've seen it, and I'm still learning. I still have so much more to learn. But I've seen how we act. And religious people and the church people and people that have never encountered God's heart, they put up a front. They put up a fake, a facade that says everything is cool, everything is fine, everything is A-okay. How are you doing, man? I'm doing good, bro. How you doing? Everything's great, man. A little bit, but I'm doing fine. And inside, you are broken. Every single one of us here has a little bit of brokenness. But we try to cover it. We try to hide it because there's no place to go that can help me with this. And I want to tell you, friends, and people that are here, and buds, hopefully we can establish great relationship with every single person here. I want to tell you, I don't want to be a part of that church. I don't want to be involved in a church where we can't express our brokenness. I don't want to be involved in a church where we're afraid to be real with each other. Because that's not what God had in the heart from the beginning. God never had that intention. God wanted everyone to be real with each other so that we can express our brokenness, and He can heal it, and He can mend it. That's why James, in the book of James, chapter 5, it tells us, you confess to one another, you talk to one another about your struggles, and God will be there to heal and mend and make you and pull you through. I don't want to be a part of a place or a community or a church that always has to hide, that is always afraid of saying the true reality. God is waiting. Jesus is waiting to meet us where we are at. If you've been in church for 10 years, good for you. God still wants to meet you where you're at. If you've been in church for 2 months, good for you. I'm glad, because there's so much more work that God wants to do in your life. There's so much more writing in your story that Jesus wants to do. So He is willing to meet you. He is willing to be where you're at. You don't have to fake it. You don't have to run away from it. Just be real and be who you are. Jesus comes in, and the way He presents His life-transforming message is through a story. And as we connect with the stories, He starts speaking and saying and telling all His stories. As a matter of fact, a lot of the things that Jesus preached about, 2/3 of them were being said in a way of a story. That's about 75% of all the words that Jesus said in the New Testament were recorded in the way of a story. Jesus was not only the best preacher, the best teacher, He was also the best storyteller. And that's why people were able to connect, and they were able to see what Jesus was seeing when He spoke through stories. That's why Hollywood has this down. Whenever we watch a movie like a romantic comedy or a drama or whatever type of movie that we watch, we always kind of like, oh man, that's me right there. Yeah, that's how I would act. Yeah, that guy from The Notebook, Ross Gosling or whatever his name. Yeah, that's exactly how I am, man. My girl is lucky because that's who I am right there. And the girls look at the ladies and they're like, yeah, that's how I am. That's how I act. That's my story right there. I remember watching even on television the sitcoms and Roseanne and all these shows and be like, that's my family right there, man. The Wonder Years. How many of you guys ever saw The Wonder Years? Kevin Arnold. Man, I would always watch Kevin Arnold. I'd be like, man, that's me right there, man. He's getting the girl Wendy, and I just related all the time. Like, man, Wendy didn't pay attention to him in the beginning, and then he's chasing after her, and it was just like, man, that is so me. I was like 12, 11 years old, and I was already relating. But it's because the story is being said, and you connect with it. And Jesus is like, that's what people need to listen to. You don't need to hear humongous theological, like, big time stuff. It's like it'll fly over our heads. Many of us don't even know that there's 66 books in the Bible. What, 66 books? Yeah. But we know God loves us. We know that His love is immeasurable. And yeah, there's time to learn the technical. There's time to learn the evidences. There's time to learn a lot of this. But the practical things that we all need to understand is that God is consistently chasing after us. And that is why, since the beginning of time, He chose to give His message across in the way of a story. And some of your stories are what's going to change the story of this community, the story of your family, the story of your marriage, the story of your kids, the story of your life. Jesus spoke in stories. And another reason why He spoke in stories is because they are powerful. I mean, how many of you have actually heard a story that moved you, that it made you cry? My wife is a big time crybaby, and every time we watch either a movie, it could be about horses and stuff, and she'll start crying because she's just like, oh, the horse, and she'll just start. And when they tell her a story, she'll just start crying. She's just so heartbroken about any little stories because they're powerful. A lot of stories move us. I remember being in Mexico as a little kid and playing outside, and one of the reasons my mom didn't want to, she never wanted me outside late. It was too dangerous, or for whatever reason it was, to come in for dinner. She didn't want me outside hanging out with my friends. So she decided to tell me the story that her family members told her when she was a little girl, which was the story of La Llorona. I don't know if in the Hispanic culture, there's this fictitious horror icon that's called the Llorona, or the crybaby, or the girl that cries all the time. And in the story, this lady loses her kids, or they drown in the lake or something like that, and throughout the whole time, La Llorona is seeking her kids, and she comes out at night to look for kids and takes them and steals them and takes them away to this place. And me as a kid, I was like, there's no way I'm going to be outside on the street. There's no way I'm going to go. If it gets dark, I'm running into the house, and you'll see me sitting down next to my dad and my mom the entire night until we go to sleep. And I'll probably ended up sleeping in the same bed as them because I was just so scared. The stories were powerful. They took effect, and I was just like... But that's why stories were part of Jesus' culture. It took effect right away. It made people realize it was powerful. It moved them to know, and they were able to relate to everything that he said. Stories are powerful. And one of the greatest things, and this just rocks my world, every time people heard Jesus speak, if you read the New Testament carefully, and you read the verses in Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, you read some verses and you hear the people saying, man, this guy, I don't know who he is, but this guy speaks with authority. This guy is powerful. And other people would be like, we have never heard anyone speak the way Jesus is speaking right now. So much so that even the religious people, the Pharisees, the people of the law, they were even amazed and said, we've never heard anyone speak like this. And you're like, what are you guys talking about? All he's saying is he's just saying stories. That's all he's doing. He's not preaching like a mega sermon with like a bunch of notes and a bunch of Bible verses. He's just telling stories about sowers and rich men and poor men. That's all he's doing. But the people that were on the other end of every story, they were moved by it. They were amazed by it. And they said, this guy, like no other. He speaks like no other. And I want you to think about that, because if you've been in church long enough, you know that Jesus spoke in parables. You know that Jesus spoke in stories. And it's just kind of gone over your head. But think about it. In his time, at that moment, the religious culture that was around them, people were at the temple, at the synagogue, the Pharisees, the professionals, the people that were being paid to say the law and to teach the law, the big time people, they were in the synagogues, in the temples, like teaching this crazy stuff about the law, and they were like professionals. They studied it their whole lives. They studied the Old Testament. They gave themselves every day to listen to study the Old Testament in and out. They knew everything about the Old Testament, and they were in the temples every day teaching and preaching these amazing sermons. And here comes this little Jewish carpenter, and he just starts telling people stories, and people were like, we've never heard anything like this. But people were able to relate, and they connected because the Pharisees and the religious people and the religious folk that were around them every day, they were being turned off by them. They were always in the synagogues, they were always in the temples, talking about stuff that probably didn't relate to what they were dealing with at this moment. It was so bad that the religious people, the Pharisees and the teachers of the law, they made their own like type of expressways where they only could walk. They connected the temple to where they lived, and it was on like a second, third story, kind of a bridge where they connected themselves between the synagogue and the temple so that they would never have to go through where the common people walked through. Now you ask yourself, where did Jesus walk through the entire time? Jesus was never part of that bridge society. Jesus was never part of that high-class society where it's like, I can't hang with the common folk. I can't hang with you type of people. No, I got to hang with the upper class. He was never like that. Jesus walked where every single one of us walked. Jesus walked where all of they walked. So when Jesus spoke, it wasn't just because his words were appealing. It was his lifestyle that was just getting their attention. And a lot of our lifestyles have to come down a little bit in the sense of Let's be a little bit more real. Let's be a little bit more transparent and not think that we have it all together, so that when we spread the gospel, when we sow the seed, when we talk about Jesus, it's in a way where people will understand, where people will be like, you know what? I see how you live, and it makes sense now. Jesus was humble, and I see that you're humble. Man, that makes a lot of sense. Because a lot of times we teach about Jesus and how he was humble and how he was a servant. And they're like, but what about you, man? You're always bossing people around. You're always telling people what to do. I never seen you pick up the garbage. I never seen you do this. I never seen you serve anyone. So what are you telling me about Jesus that serves? It has nothing. And so Jesus was with the people. He wasn't on the higher ground of society. He wasn't there. He was teaching where they were at. And that's why the stories were so impactful. That's why he changed lives. That's why 2,000 years later, we're still talking about Jesus. We're not talking about some king of England or some king of Palestine. We're talking about a Jewish carpenter. We're talking about an average Joe. But that average Joe changed humanity, changed our future. Hebrews chapter 12, verse 2 says this: looking unto Jesus, the author and perfecter of our faith. Other versions say the author and the finisher of our faith. Jesus is still writing your story. Jesus is the author of your story. You may be in a predicament. You may be in a bad moment in your life. You may just want to be like, gosh, I can't put up with this anymore. I can't keep doing the same routine over and over again. I'm bored. A lot of us, and I've met a lot of people that have come to the point where they just want to give up. There's nothing else to live for. But Jesus is telling us, I'm the author and I'm the finisher. And I'm writing your story. And if you allow me to finish your story, if you allow me to write your story, chances are it's going to come out good. Chances are you're going to die happy. Because society and culture teaches otherwise. It teaches us, you write your story. You do what you have to do. You make it work. You make your own story. You achieve your success. You achieve your level of greatness. You can do it. You can do it. You can do it. And so we're fighting every day. I can do it. And yes, I can. Yes, I can. Yes, and then we realize, no, I can't. I'm struggling. I need help. And then when we realize that we can't do it, we're just like, oh, forget this. I don't want anything anymore. And we're done with life. And Jesus is like, you were never meant to write your story, man. I'm the author. I'm the one that has the master penmanship, the awesomeness of writing. I'm the one with the creative ideas. Remember, I made the universe. Remember, I wrote the story. Remember the book that you have, that you take out only on Sunday mornings? I wrote that. Let me finish your story. Let me write your story. And the awesome things about our story, and the awesome thing about every single person's story here, is the way it becomes awesome and amazing and spectacular is when Jesus is the center of attention, when Jesus is the main character, when Jesus is the main protagonist in the story. A lot of us are used to just, it revolves around me. It's my story. I have to be the main guy here. But none of our stories would ever be worth it if Jesus didn't do anything in it. It would just be a good story. It wouldn't be a life-changing story. That's why I said in the beginning, if I would just write my biography or an autobiography of my life and just say my puny accomplishments. Hey, I went to high school, I graduated, and a lot of Hispanics don't graduate in my day and age. Hey, I went to college, and a lot of Hispanics don't go to college in my day and age, and they don't graduate. Hey, I'm working, I got married, I've been married for about 5 years, and I'm not divorced. A lot of Hispanics get divorced, and a lot of marriages nowadays, within 2 years, the statistics are 50% divorce rate or more. Hey, I made it. And all these puny little accomplishments, but I never bring it down to Jesus intervening. interjecting and changing the story completely and giving me life and giving me something to look forward every day and giving me that answer to my distress and the moments where I want to throw in the towel, the moments I want to give up, the moments I can't do it anymore. Jesus says, hey, I'm here. And he gives that hope. That's the amazingness about Jesus. And as he writes the story, as a kid, I listened to the story of Moses and Pharaoh, and God tells Moses, liberate my people, go to Pharaoh and tell him, let my people go. And he goes up to Pharaoh, and Pharaoh's like, all right, your people could go. But then the Bible says, and then God changed his heart. And I'm like, why did God change his heart? He was about to let the people go. And as he does that, Moses has to go back about 10 times and says, let my people go. Pharaoh says, no. And plague comes. Let my people go. No. And here's a bunch of frogs. Let my people go. No. And here's a bunch of locusts. Let my people go. No. And here's the water turning into blood. And it's like 10 times the dude had to go up to Pharaoh and let my people go. And up until he had to finally, the last time, the seas spread open and all this spectacular stuff happens. And it's like, man, what a dramatic story. He could have done it that first time, but God was like, no. If I don't make this dramatic, my name is not going to be lifted up. And that story carried Israel all 400 years of their history. 40 years in the desert. It carried them throughout all of their history before they actually got across to the promised land. They remembered the story. They remembered. There was a point in time where Peter in the New Testament, he was in jail and time, day after day went in and no one rescued him and God didn't rescue him. There wasn't any angels to rescue him and Peter was in jail every day and suffering in jail. And then the day before he was going to get crucified and hanged, God comes in and liberates Peter. At the last moment, at that moment, right before they were going to take him out, he gets liberated. It's drama and it's God. It's like, that's the story of God. Paul and Silas in prison in the New Testament too. They're locked up and then they just start singing and dancing and clapping and the whole jail, it starts shaking and it gets open and not only do they become free, but every single jailmate and prison person that was there becomes free and everyone's like, wow, this is amazing. But it's because it was God. It wasn't Paul, Silas, it wasn't Peter, it wasn't Moses. Everyone remembers the story because God did it. God did the amazing part. It's not up to you and me to do the amazing parts. It's up to God to do the amazing part. That's what we have to understand. That's why God, I want to let you know, God is still writing your story. Tell the person next to you, God is still writing your story. It's not over. Tell him, it's not over. It's not. Don't think that you're suffering. Yeah, you're going through difficult times. Yeah, life isn't where it should be right now. But let me tell you this. Let me give you some good news. It's not over. It's not over until the fat lady sings. The last thing I want to talk about, and you have a little plastic bag with you. If you didn't get a plastic bag, raise your hand. We want to give you, there's one, we need a plastic bag over there, please, Daisy. Within that little plastic bag, you will find a little container of seeds. I want you to open that little container of seeds. And I want you to pour those seeds in the plastic bag. I want you to see the seeds. So go for it. Pour them in there. I want you to visualize the seed. I'm a visual learner. I need to see what people are teaching me. That's seed right there. Tell the person next to you, hey, this is seed. If you don't have a green thumb, like I don't have a green thumb, you've never seen a seed in your life other than in an apple. But that's a seed. Pour it in there, pour it in that plastic bag. I want you to see all of these little bits of creations of God. Hold it up, Benito, hold it up. There you go. Can you see them a little bit? Good. Within your bag of seed contains a powerful life-driving force. Can you imagine? You do not know how that seed grows. All you know is that if it's a flower seed or an apple seed or whatever its kind of seed it is, you stick it in the ground and some way, somehow, that seed will grow. Unless you took intensive courses in horticulture and studied the life of a seed, you cannot explain to me the profundity, the profoundness of what that seed does, how it actually grows. And you don't really have to. How many of you guys like gardening? Any green thumbs in here? A couple. You like to garden too, Bradley? No, the rest of us, we hate anything to do with flowers, correct? Yeah, take me out of the garden, please. But you don't have to know how that seed grows when you plant whatever it is you're going to plant. If it's a nice rose garden, or if it's, I don't even know the names of flowers. That's how bad I am. Tulips or whatever come out that people like to plant. No one, or daisies, yeah, they just pointed at daisies, whatever it is that you're going to plant, you don't know how that seed's going to grow. It says on the carton, daisies, okay, put it in the soil and watch it grow. I got to water it, but that's about it. You don't know exactly the process of how it grows. But within it, there's life. It's a powerful force, that little thing that you have in your plastic bag, and every time you look at it, I want you to think of your story, and you may think, out of the billions of people that are here, you're so small, you're so insignificant, and no, you're not. Because out of all the billions of people that are on this planet, there is life inside of you. And there is power to break out of any kind of soil you're in, any kind of environment you're in. There is the ability for the seed to grow in any environment. And that's why Matthew chapter 13 talks about several different environments of the seed. If you know, Jesus starts talking about the sower. And I'm going to run through this before time runs out. He starts talking about the sower. And he says this about the sower. The sower comes, and throughout this chapter and the chapter before, 8 times he gives a story. And all 8 times that story is in regards to the kingdom of God. Can you imagine that? The way he compares the kingdom, the glorious kingdom of God, is through stories. As a matter of fact, most of his comparisons in the New Testament to the kingdom of God are through stories. It's through a simple story, the kingdom of God. And he says there was a sower. And he says this generous sower just starts throwing seed. And he's throwing seed, and some of the seed falls on the path or on the road. And to bring it into 2013, think about seed falling, like if that seed that you have in your bag falling on the sidewalk or on the cement or on the street or on a parking lot. A place where people walk through every day. When Jesus said the seed fell on the path or on the wayside, the people back then, they understood. They're like, man, that seed is not going to grow. If that seed fell on the wayside or on the path, that seed's not going to grow. So Jesus is talking, and these people are visualizing, they're connecting. Like, yeah, man, that seed, and no, it's not going to grow on the path. And so Jesus says, yeah, the seed gets thrown, and some of it fell on the path. And in our day, it fell on the sidewalk. It fell on the street. And he makes them do a connection where every seed needs proper soil. Now there's some seed that can find its way through any little crack, any little crevice in cement. I mean, you could see it on the sidewalk. If you walk home or in front of your house, you see your sidewalk and there's like grass growing in between the cracks and the crevice of the sidewalk. It's like the seed found the way out. I'm telling you, that seed that you have in your hand, it has the power to grow in any type of environment. All it needs is a little crack. All it needs is a little bit of light, and it'll start making its way to the surface. But yet, Jesus is getting these people to connect and to put two and two together. Hard soil, seed, it won't mix well. It's not going to grow. Something has to happen to the soil so that this seed can grow. And what they start thinking about, because they're able to connect at that level, they start thinking about they have to plow the soil. Man, if that sower was smart, he should have plowed the land. He should have cracked open the land. And people started putting two and two together. And they started thinking. And then Jesus explains it on further later on in the verses. Everyone needs soft soil for the seed to grow. And they started thinking, the people that listened to the story, they started thinking, my heart is that path. My heart is hard. And a lot of them started to realize, and that's why Jesus was saying it, because he understood everything that the people knew about religion, everything that the people knew about God was represented through people like the Pharisees and these teachers that thought they were so much better than everyone else. That was their visualization of the kingdom of God, watching them people do their job. Watching the priests and the Pharisees do the work. That was their concept of the kingdom of God. So it wasn't very good. That's why their hearts were hard. They were deaf to the truth. Every time they heard the truth, they were bitter. They were hard. Everything about them was cynical. They were analyzing, over analytical people. That everything everyone said about anything religious, it was just, no, it's not gonna, don't talk to me. And you have probably met some of your friends that you mention God and they're just like, shut up, don't tell me anything. I don't want to hear it. I know the whole church thing, all they want is your money. They're all hypocrites. All they want is this and that. And their hearts are hardened because they've seen it. And most of us in our church, within us, maybe some of us here, have that same type of soil, have that same type of land. It's hard. Our hearts are hard. They're cynical. They're defensive. They don't want to let anything in. And when the common people started listening to these stories, they came to the conclusion, because they knew what Jesus was talking about. If in order for seed to grow, the land needs to get plowed. Let me tell you this, you can be in church your entire life. You can come every Sunday afternoon to torch. You can do amazing works, good works. You can feed all the homeless people everywhere in the Chicagoland area. You can be up here singing. You can be giving your offerings every Sunday and even giving more than everyone else. But your heart is probably very hard, because you're probably still bitter in your relationships with your parents, in your relationship with your spouse, in your relationship with your kids. You're probably still holding on to a lot of brokenness that is making your heart hard. And by trying to do work and by trying to do all of that stuff, you're covering it up. And Jesus is telling you, brother, friend, amigo, it's time to plow your land. It's time to soften up your soil. In order for the seed to grow, it's time to soften up your heart. And he talks a lot about other environments, the one that falls in rocky soil, the one that falls in thorny soil, and then he says that there's some seed that falls in good soil. And all of this is just to say that the message, the story that Jesus is so desperately seeking for you guys to listen to, it's only going to grow in good soil. And a lot of our soil needs to get fixed. A lot of the world's soil, the culture that is out there, your family, the people that you wrote down on your list of 5, the people that are out there in our schools, the young people, the old people, the teachers that are out there that are trying to make a difference in our kids' life, and they're teaching and they just don't see any change. Our public school system is getting worse. They're shutting down schools. everyone's terrified. Even my wife and I, we're talking about, man, where are we going to send our kids? Maybe we're going to have to teach our kids. We're going to have to go through homeschool with them because the way things are looking, it's not looking good. And the soil is hard. It's rocky. It's thorny. But that seed that you have in your hands right now, it has the power to spring up life. The message of Christ has the power to spring up life. The only thing you have to do is make sure your soil is soft. Can you soften up your hearts to receive the message of Christ? And can you try to get in with your other friends and your other people to soften up their hearts by giving them a story that Jesus has done in your life? So I want you to take that into consideration, and I want you to work at it this week, this month, this year. Can you work on your soil? Translated to nowadays, can you work on your heart? Can you allow God to work in your heart? If your heart is bitter, if your heart is rocky, and what Jesus meant by rocky is that there was a little bit of soil on top, but right beneath it was a bunch of rocks. So when the root would come down, it had nothing to hold on to because it was just rocks. It was talking about shallow. It was talking about superficial. A lot of us here have a superficial religion. Coming here and listening and giving offering and serving, that's superficial if we don't have deep roots. Soil requires it to be deep. This is religion. A lot of religion becomes superficial at times. It's just on the surface, but it doesn't fix the heart. Can you allow your heart to be fixed by God?